Good afternoon to you, our dear esteemed viewers. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Community Show. As the holidaymakers return back to school, conversations that has been running through the airwaves of various uh, news outlets, social media, has been the issue relating to school fees. And this week we're discussing back to school blues, burden of school fees on parents in this shrinking economy of ours. My name is Douglas Drake. I'll be your host and moderator for tonight's conversation, and I'm being joined by Mrs. Angela Momokwe and Mr. Oscar Amanya, who will help us unpack this conversation. But before we delve into the nitty-gritties of the show, I'll just quickly request that I'll start with Angela. You can go ahead and introduce yourself. Then I'll do the same with Oscar. Then we can begin the conversation. Mrs. Angela, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Anyango Angella Tadie, the former youth councillor of the district. Currently, I'm working for Favor of God Ministry. I'm a human rights defender, gender activist. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Send my greetings to the people of Pade. I come from Gulu, specifically
I'm in
from
Gulu City.
my village is in one. Oh, awesome. I can see everyone putting on the t-shirt of Sacred Heart of School. I was at Laibi College, so definitely can affiliate
Thank you
so much with. Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to have you here. Oscar Amanya, very happy to have you here. Kindly quickly come on board and say hello and good afternoon to the viewers. All right, as Oscar joins us, let us just have the other panelist who has joined us. Kindly, I think you should come back again. Oscar, yes, Oscar, you're back on. I've called upon you to go ahead and make a quick introduction, and then we can begin the conversation. Oscar, the floor is yours. Most welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Onen. Sorry for that technical glitch. My name is Oscar Amanya, project coordinator for Youth Innovation Initiative, community-based organization working for advanced youth rights and youth involvement in different aspects. I'm also a teacher at the school in my background. This is a girls' school in Kamwenge district in Southwest Uganda. Glad to be here.
All right. Thank you very much, Oscar, for that wonderful introduction that you've made there. We're definitely thrilled to have all of you join us to this wonderful discussion. The lady who is joining us, kindly, as you fix your microphone, when you later on come back, I'll let you go ahead and make the introduction. But let us just begin the conversation. I'll start with the lady, Mrs. Angela. Mrs. Angela, what has been making news and headlines in the news is the back to school saga, and schools at the moment charging exorbitant school fees. Be it that you are a youth counselor, but also someone who's in the education sector, kindly put into perspective this conversation that we're discussing today. Angela, over to you.
Thank you so much, Onen. Despite the shrinking economy, the cost of education has become so high over time. We have two lines, two parallel teams. On one hand, it's those with money. On the other hand, are the poor. You find these days we have private schools versus government schools. There are a few government schools that are performing exceptionally good, but majority of our schools that are performing better country is the private. And for your child to have better or best education, most people, I need to take my child to a private school for my child to have good performance. But you find all these schools are levying a very high tuition, or rather school fees for the students. And even the requirements are extraordinary. And sometimes when they are making resolutions to increase school fees, only a very few schools involve the parents. They take the decisions of the parents into increasing the school fees. So you find this is really leaving a very heavy burden on parents at home. Up now, school started on Monday, official opening of school. But you find a number of children and pupils and students still at home, just because parents have not yet bought the school requirements and they have not yet paid fully the school fees. I think one other thing which is causing this much on parents and schools is high tax levy on school and commodities. Much as we are tasked to pay school fees and also to buy requirements, you find that there is also emergence of middlemen. They go to villages, they buy, for example, maize at 500 shillings. They go and store it in their stores. They wait when the prices have gone high, then they bring it back to the community. And even those ones who have sold, they're now buying expensively. So it is really something that the government really have to see into it and looking at how they can regulate education sector so that we have a balanced equation. Because if you see SDG looking at education, there is education for all. But with this too much shrinking in the economy for education for their child, which child can afford free education? So that is something really to look on.
Make very key issues, and you highlight them in your submission. They are true that there is emergence of middlemen. The cost of education has gone high, and this alone also is affecting the quality of education at the same time, because there's competition between private and government schools, but seemingly education is expensive. Let's just bring the gentleman on board. Oscar, I just want to engage you just from where Mrs. Angela leaves her conversation. I just like to get your perspective, an introductory remark to this conversation, but also relating it to what Mrs. Angela just submitted in the discussion. Oscar, over to you.
Thank you, Onen, for that good perspective in today's topic. To bring about to context, education and its cost are something that are related, because everyone who invests in education expects an output. So at the end of the day, we need to look at education as an investment. So the major problem that is causing this kind of cost and the feeling that parents and guardians are experiencing, that the fees and the cost of education is becoming exorbitant, is basically because of which kind of, I will say, output that they want their students to actually show out there. Now, when I say most Ugandans put it in the context of academic performance, we want results. How many division ones does a certain school have? Has my child actually gained all the competencies and what he's required to gain from education? So for that matter, with from the view of economics, that you have an input and you need an output, and specifically everyone would wish to have the best of their child, the choice to these schools now comes back to the parent. Because when we say exorbitant, we should be sure that there are some schools, for example, that are government aided, some schools that for secondary schools, and those ones UPE schools and for primary schools that actually do not charge these fees. So we should look at why exactly are some of the schools charging a lot of fees and why are some not charging a lot of fees? Is it because, like Miss Angela said, these people are not giving, the schools that are not charging good fees are not giving what they are supposed to give to students? Is it because that maybe these schools that are charging a lot of fees are providing more than the other schools are providing? And then we come to the context of this. But to begin from where Angela had put, is the government regulating the school fees? Around August, that is last year, the government was trying to put up a policy to regulate the fees through the cabinet, one of the cabinet decisions. However, the policy, I don't know how it has been implemented, because most schools still charge the fees they were charging, and most of them can still raise the fees the way they want. So maybe the problem stems on how we implement some of these policies. So the government needs to look for ways of not just drafting policies and putting them in place, but also following up and see if actually some of these schools or all any other policies are actually being implemented. The second way to look into this thing is also look at the fact that whereas we have policies that we think are guiding free education, like we have USA and UE, the cost of education is still high. Let us look at the capitation grant that that the government gives to schools that are government aided in primary schools and in secondary schools. Is it enough to accommodate all the needs and the challenges that these schools face in providing education? Because we shouldn't just look at the outcry of the citizens and leave out the service providers. Can these schools actually operate without charging that kind of fees? What is the working conditions of teachers in these schools? What is the cost that would be involved in these schools, and why uh, why do they give us a justification to charge this to charge these kinds of charges? That is one other thing that we should look at. So another thing that I would submit last in this context is that parents and guardians ought to look at education as any other cost that they incur, as any other bill. There is no single item on the market that has not increased. These schools will buy whatever they use from the market that these parents and guardians go to. So in this case, there should be need for proper planning. Where am I taking my child? Can I afford the fees for this school, or can I not afford the fees of this school? Can we plan properly? Like if we are in the festive seasons, people have a lot of expenditure. They spend so much and forget that there will be time to bring back students to school. So parents also ought to look at what happens in the market where they go every day, and they should know that schools also fetch whatever they use from the same market. Then the government should also look into how much to support schools so that the financial status of the schools is not affected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Those are very brilliant submissions that you make there, which will then make me invite Mrs. Josephine. Towards the end of Oscar's submission, he highlights an issue that I think, in my opinion, is somewhat controversial. He says that parents and guardians ought to look at education like any other bill. I would just like Josephine, as you come on board, to put into context. Look at countries that are way developed than Uganda. Look at South Africa, and maybe then juxtapose it with Western world, where education is looked at as a common good and not looked at as a private commodity like it is here in Uganda. Should we therefore continue, or should schools continue exorbitantly pricing parents or guardians, because they also incur expenditure on purchasing resources that are used to provide resources for their children? Josephine, over to you.
So you're going to say that why we are facing so much problems, like I've had at the end of the first chapter, that we really need, like, if we have to compare ourselves to different countries, we have to be looking at how they spend, just like Oscar has spoken before, that you're going to say that very many people are spending so much during the Christmas season, forgetting the problems that they are going to encounter when school opens. So we have to be so much sure the problems are about the school. So if we are to look at the school being opened in early Feb, and very many parents are facing such issues. Yes, we have very many schools that were established, but we need a hand with the parents themselves to subject or to help their children. We have South Africa, the schools that are very more expensive than Uganda. I don't know, you subject if we are looking at the international education in Uganda, international education is very expensive compared to any other education system that we're having in Uganda today. How much we are looking
Excuse me,
up to the curriculum that we're having.
We are
Yes.
having some technical issues. Your network is breaking. Maybe you could kindly turn off the video so that your audio is not interrupted. Thank you. All right, can make it
Okay, so is the audio safe?
Josephine?
So, yes.
Yes, you are saying.
So I was still saying that, okay. So I was still saying that if we are comparing ourselves to other countries like South Africa that you have mentioned there, like any other country that we may look at, we really need to start comparing, but looking also at the finances we have. I may have missed a bit of the first call, but I'm going to say that in Uganda, we have a new curriculum which is more expensive among the secondary schools than the government thought of it. They looked at it as on a wage level that it is important, but it is important to remove the old curriculum which was less practical, and maybe we needed something that is more practical, but it is very expensive to the students and to the parents also. So this is limiting the development that we may have looked at. So in other words, to just give a bit of the solution that could maybe be for the parents in how to solve the school blues that they may be facing at this time in our shrinking economy. I think by now, parents should plan. Because I said it in the beginning, that we need prior planning for them to be knowing that by this time of time or by this time of month, there will be need for my child to be going to school, and this is the level. We have nothing to do with the commodity. Yes, things are expensive, but it's upon the parent to priorly plan. Drake, come back to you.
You with the parents by parents. And I think I'll then pose the question back to Angela and still engage her. Parents have been planning. I know it's first term, but parents maybe could have spent money during the festive season. But most parents, from the best of my knowledge, they don't spend money knowing that February is going to come and they have to send their children back to school. Is it now that's then therefore bringing the issue at the moment that you have fees worth 1 million Ugandan shillings or more that you're supposed to pay. You have requirements worth the equivalent amount of fees that you're supposed to pay. And yet the fees that even you're paying, you may find that you are contributing more to development fees, of which the development doesn't end, by the way. Are you contributing to PTA? Maybe could you kindly come and put this into perspective? What do those PTA funds do? Is it really necessary? What do those development funds do? Is it really necessary? Because from where I sit, it is increasing the cost of education and affecting or leading to a decline in students enrolling or even going back to school. And it is increasing actually on the illiteracy gap that we are experiencing. Angela, over to you. Hello. Angela, you're muted. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Onen. Looking at the PTA, to a bigger percentage, many schools are not putting to play what PTA fund should have done. It is okay to put a price on PTA to develop the school if the development is at all there. But what most schools need to embrace is involvement of parents in planning for the funds that they are paying for, which they are not doing. And I think to maybe pin the school that the government they really need to invest. They need to invest in government schools, putting good structures for teachers, motivating the teachers, putting good structures for learners, and then we see where other fees are being levied on. I just envy and I really appreciate what they have done to their educational system is far much better than what we are thinking. If the government can only invest in schools as a public good, we are not going to see more schools running as private institutions because the children are having better education in schools. The teachers are well motivated. There is no running around that I am running away from government school because private school is providing me this and this. All that the private school are providing is what the government is providing. And also the pay for the government school, it is far much better than the private school if the government is at all to invest in learning. And I want to touch something little on what my sister just said. Imagine, the bringing up of the new curriculum, which was not there before. You find that it's only in urban places where this is fully embraced. When you go to rural schools, you hardly even find computers in the computer laboratories. So now, others may even just have 1 or 2 computers in the entire school, and yet the number of students are overwhelming. How can hundreds of students run into using 2 computers? They at homes also, whenever even if they go with the homework to do at home, the parents do not have phones at home. All they have is capability. So then, can the government really? My major cry is on the government. If at all they can embrace education as a public good and invest properly in it, then we are good to go.
Thank you, Angela. Your cry is on the government, of which my brother also is a key issue that's the implementation and following up, which I think is a major challenge is with all the laws that are beautiful and well codified laws in the but then the problem comes in implementing and following up. We then invite us on board to come and first of all submit on how best you think the government can go ahead, implement, follow up, evaluate, and affect these policies that are in place. Because the fact is the cost of production, which is leading high effect in prices in the community, which whether we want or we do not want, will affect the prices that schools will charge in form of school fees. Education in Uganda is both private and public, within, but even the schools run on its own resources to operate. And many of government schools that are there is minimal resources to facilitate them, which then leads to even this government will charge some little money for kids to go ahead and attain education, which by the way is still expensive for some parents. So now the conversation that I would like Oscar to take us through is how best can we then push the government? We have seen Parliament debating on the floor of the August House on how they can intervene. Is it just enough to end some intervention? Oscar, over to you.
Thank you so much, Drake, for bringing me to the perspective of what problem trying to function. One of the what I want to begin with is the comparative you had brought on education being free in some countries, and I would want it to be one of the things I would suggest government would do to be as a solution in the first place. If you look at Rwanda spends just above 4% of its GDP on education. What is the funding that the government put in Uganda? In Uganda's education? Is education one of the most prioritized areas or sectors of this of the budget for Uganda? For example, in 2022 to 2023, Uganda was spending above just 2% of its on education, but Rwanda all have increased the fund education just above 4%. So this brings that even public education will not be accessible or remain of low quality if it is not well funded. When it becomes of low quality, it will give a chance private to attract most from the community wants results. And for that matter, as long as a person has the market, they will start charging a lot of fees from parents. And parents, because they have no solution rather than joining that primary school in maybe rural Kamwenge, which does not even perform, people will spend 7 years and get F9s. They will rather go and hustle their way out and find their students in schools that are at least performing. So for that matter, the government in the first thing should increase the funding that it puts in education sector. Make sure that the public schools are well facilitated so that they can promote teaching as people would want it, that people can see results from public schools and have a motivation to join them. That is one. The second thing is that some of the policies are, like I said, the cabinet had passed a policy capping the school fees at each level. I think that for secondary school, for day scholars, it was around 960,000 shillings. But all we do is see that in the media. All we do is see the people on the floor of parliament discussing and debating them, like you say. It is being done right in schools. I'm very sure that some of the schools have opened, but there is no school which has been visited by an inspector. So can we put the officers we have to task, those people who are supposed to be visiting schools, inspecting, knowing what is happening in schools, are they doing the tasks or the duties they are supposed to do? Can we go to the ground and see what is causing failure in public schools that is leading these people to go to private schools and get charged so much money? So the government needs to make sure that it puts to task the inspectors, those officers that are put in place to make sure that what the government discusses is what exactly is being put in place in schools and on ground. And the last bit of it is finding economic means to make sure that the cost of living, not only for education and for not only for education but also for other commodities, gets reduced, because even the affordability comes from how well these backgrounds that we get students from are. People will not have the money to feed on, and you expect them to say that they can even afford 1,500 for building fund for a primary for government primary school that I attended in Ivanda district. We used to pay 1,500 shillings, but there are some families in the district which cannot afford such kind of money because they are even failing to get what to feed on. So poverty alleviation mechanisms should be made more sounding. If we talk about the parish development model and what have they actually tackled the economic challenges of families, so that even if we make education costs so low, these people can actually afford this kind of education. So I think if those three strategies are put in place by the government, then at least we could see affordability of education at least increasing when the incomes in families are increasing too. We would see a reduced cost on the sides of both schools and the community. And three, if the funding is put in public, if more funding is put in public schools, then the public schools would actually perform better and give reasons to parents there to choose to take their students to such schools. Otherwise, they would still keep risking to take their students to private schools, which will be overcharging them. Thank you. Onen, over to
Thank you very
you.
much. Thank you. Thank you very much for those very wonderful submissions. As we edge towards the closure of our submissions, I just quickly want to first bring in Josephine, then we can wind up the conversation. Josephine, listening to Oscar, he's passing it some way of hope that actually this country has not lost entirely. But I'm still concerned about that rural Uganda who lives or who survives on less than $1 a day, but has 6 children who are supposed to go to school, but are unable to go to school because the parent or the guardian is incapacitated to fund their education. I would like you to speak for that local person because this is community voices and we voice out the realities that are happening in our community without sugarcoating or covering issues. Just speak to that person or speak from the perspective of that person to a policymaker who is going to watch us and listen to this and maybe come up with implementation.
Yes, thank you so much, Drake. So for that person that is in such circumstance, the family is earning maybe less than $1, 6 children. So they are looking at how can they manage with the education, because in Uganda we have that perspective that education is the key for success. So that person likely, since already the 6 children are there, we are looking at the government, just like the 4 people have spoken, Angela and Oscar, that the government should increase on the funding. And then before even I emphasize the funding in schools, you need the funding in schools, we may need the money to come, grades come up, but we are forgetting this person who is still down. If the government increases on the income of this person down, like through the parish development model, and then the money is received by the right people, we believe the employment will come. Because what is limiting parents to take their children to school? What may limit this person who's earning this kind of education, his job is not supportive? The person may use the children, but the source of income is not supportive. So if we are to look at how can he be able to educate the children, to educate his children to go to school, so we should first go back to how he's going to increase his income. So if the government comes up with different plans, different programs on how to support such a person in a low area, or to develop the income, to increase on the income. We have seen the government comes up with different methods and different instruments on how to control such. But somehow, somewhere, we saw the swindling of the money in the middle of the way, so that this money does not reach to the people in low areas. But if we happen the money reaches to these people, and this man who is earning less than $1 can increase to maybe $2, $5, $6. So by the end of the year, this person will be able to educate the students or to educate the children. But if the income is still low, however much the schools may be developed, however much the government comes up with programs of enlightening and giving teachers enough money so that good grades are there, still, do you know that in Uganda, we have very many parents that cannot even afford the government institutions, the government schools? Yes, the government schools, UPE, was put in place mainly to help parents that are in poorly divested areas or in poor states. But we have very many government schools that are now having much money, or they are waging much school fees to students than even some private institutions. We have some private institutions that started on a level. So if the government institutions now have also started to increase the money for tuition or for school fees of the students, no way can this person who has over 6 children be able to educate their income. If the parent is able to increase his income, then the children, it is very easy for them to be able to attain the education. So as we are calling it not to intervene only affairs, but they also look at the income.
Thank you very much, Josephine, for this brilliant submission. Unfortunately, I really love the conversation to go further, but we have very few minutes. So just in no particular order, just request, I'll start again with you, Josephine, to give your recommendation.
The parish development model of how to help the low income earners. So we are asking the government to supervise, let the money reach to the right people. Instead of money helping other people, let it reach to the right people so that these people that are down are able to educate their children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Miss Angela, kindly come and give us the recommendations and way forward on the matter at hand.
What I would say, put across to government, is to help us regulate the pricing on goods and commodities, because these are the things which are causing a lot of stress to parents. You cannot afford certain things because the prices have gone high due to inflation ever since the COVID time until now. Secondly, high taxation is affecting especially the low income earners than those earning bigger. So can they also lower taxation so that parents can afford buying requirements as well as paying school fees? Because whatever tax that is levied upon the school, upon the commodities, the school brings it back on parents. They don't want to suffer loss at all. So those are my two pleas to the government, and to invest in education. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Thank you. Investing in education is something that has caught my mind and attention. The government really needs to invest in education because the younger generation needs to attain quality education, and they're the leaders of our country tomorrow. Thank you. And well, lastly, the gentleman, Oscar, kindly give us the recommendations and you can call off this place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Onen, and thank you everyone who joined us, the panelists. In my conclusion, I would say that first, to somebody who is watching out there, maybe a parent who does not have the fees and what we should know is that education, no matter the cost it would come with, is something important and an opener for change of what a person is going through now. So if at all there is that kind of poverty that is back at home, the only way is to find the means with which you can attain education. There are some low-cost schools, even if they are not offering quality education, such a student should at least reach out to one of them, but not stay out and drop. That is one of the things I would put out there. Then to the policymakers watching this, I think we have made it an outcry. Government should make sure that it increases public funding in education sector, such that the public sector becomes performing as the private school sector, so that parents can choose to go to public schools rather than private schools. And for inflation, that is everywhere. The cost might not be worsened by only the school fees, but even the scholastic materials. The book's cost is too much, the sanitary pads for girls. So you find that when the cost is added, tuition plus what is the school requirements would be, then it becomes too much on an everyday citizen who earns less than $1, like you said. So inflation should be looked into, let economic policies be put in place to make sure that the situation is got into control. Otherwise, thank you for hosting us. Thank you, Anen. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for the wonderful submission and creating time to join us in this space. Thank you very much, Ms. Angela, for taking time as well to join us, and Ms. Namakula Josephine for joining us in this conversation. We are Civic President, Center for Constitutional Governance, who has brought you the conversation today on school fee saga that we are experiencing as a country. Otherwise, my name is Douglas Drake. I've been your host and moderator for tonight's conversation. See you next week, same time and place. Have a blessed week. Bye-bye.